Hi, and welcome to the GC9X Postmortem. This is one of your hosts, Snarbu,
And I'm your second host, Carl.
and with us is guest host and 3DO apologist, Bobinator.
I prefer Gex over Pluck, and I think this is my karmic punishment.
It probably is. Wow, that sounded really cheesy. Anyway, well, what is there really to say about the game in question that we have chosen to play and talk about for this postmortem? I mean, it's pretty notorious by this point.
Yeah, he's a real stickler, Bubsy. He seems to get reviewed every so often. He is in a lot of collective memory of the 16-bit era, and it means lots of people like to talk about him retrospectively, but I don't think
Never
they
in a
do
really
a great
positive
job.
light, though.
Yeah,
No.
it's usually very negative. So we should probably talk about the company that actually published Bubsy. So, Bob?
They started off in 1984 with a focus on PC games and Commodore 64 games, that general 8-bit era. Usually licensed games or sports games, simulators like the Hardball series for baseball. And they actually picked their name to be higher up over Activision, which ended up not working when the claim came around, but anyway.
Yeah, how many companies did that? Did they gave themselves like names so they would appear higher in the phone book?
I love that. A list of companies just one-upping each other with extra A's, extra C's. It's great.
There isn't an Aardvark company or studio yet, so I guess
Oh, was
you know,
there? I'm pretty sure there was at least one Aardvark Games or something. Maybe they're a more modern like
maybe.
mobile producer.
But that would have been the natural evolution. That would have been like the end of game or end of days for the naming wars.
So anyway, back in the 80s, all they really did was computer stuff. In the 90s, that was when they first started doing console stuff with Bubsy. It was when they were really trying to take the console world by storm, and they had a big advertising push with magazine ads and TV spots, which I haven't actually seen, so if anyone could ever find any of those for us, we'd really appreciate it from you. But by 1992, pretty much anyone into games probably had heard of Bubsy by then. The problem is, though, that the series never could really hit that same pitch as the first game, and well, they had a Jaguar exclusive, and you can imagine how that went. And by 1996, they had Bubsy 3D, and you can imagine how that went, I'm sure. But Accolade managed to hang around for a few more years after that. I know they did really well with the Test Drive series. I think that's what kept them afloat for a while. By 1999, though, they got eaten by Infogrames, who then got eaten by Atari, who they got eaten by bankruptcy, and yeah.
Well, the way that worked, from what I understand, is that Infogrames actually bought the old Hasbro Interactive, who had all the licenses to Atari stuff at the time for whatever reason, and then they're like, you know, it's a great idea. We're going to name ourselves Atari because that's gone really well with all the other companies that named themselves that. So, what was Accolade's last game? Was it Slave Zero or Red Line? Because those were the two I know of that they published in 1999.
I think it depends what you want to call my last game, because I think I don't know who developed those two games. I believe the last game they published was Redline. That was the very last one out. But I think that was while Infogrames was transferring them over, because I think Infogrames is connected to Redline as well. So I guess maybe Slave Zero is the last one that was Accolade before they were merged into Infogrames. However, back in 1992, everyone wanted to get into the platformers. Sega had exploded onto the scene in a big way with double hits from Sonic 1 and 2, and naturally, Nintendo's Mario series was still going strong with 1990's release of Super Mario World. Developers and publishers all wanted a slice of that sweet mascot pie. Michael Berlin, an Accolade designer who'd become enamored with Sonic the Hedgehog, figured he had what it took. He assembled a team internally within Accolade, and they set out to create a Sonic killer. And in May of 1993, they unleashed it. Enter the pun-loving Bobcat.
And you know, I would like to point out that for whatever reason, cat characters in anything are almost always punny. Like they always make tons of puns. They're always really pun-loving creatures. I don't understand that. Like, I think cats in real life would be just way too grumpy to actually think puns were funny.
Maybe, I don't know, because you've got Garfield. Garfield's just a sarcastic dickhead. That's his entire theme, and that's
Pretty much.
sort of the quintessential what would a cat be? A cat would be a sarcastic dickhead. That's what they are. But I mean, on the other hand, I think puns are a different degree of also being a dickhead. The more puns you say, the angrier you make everyone around you. It's just like, I want to smack this guy in the face so much. And they will just keep doing it. And you can't hit someone. You're not allowed to hit someone for making puns. And I think that may be why cats would do it. Because it's a verbal way to shake their ass in your face and you can do nothing about it.
So in terms of story, you know, it's got kind of a fairly nonsensical plot. Basically, Bubsy is this huge jerk who has the world's largest yarn collection for whatever reason. And this advanced spacefaring race known as the Woolies have decided to descend upon his collection and steal it for whatever reason. I don't know if it's ever actually established. I guess they're called Woolies, so, you know, there's a pun there. They like yarn. Bubsy likes yarn. There's a tuffle there. But it's interesting to note that the game is actually introduced in the manual via a really well-drawn comic by Ken Macklin, I believe. And I remember actually reading that when I rented the game. I think it was one of the few times I rented a game and had the manual, and I remember reading the comic and thinking it was really cool. You know, it gets you really hyped for the game. And it's consistent in terms of style and tone with the rest of the game, so that definitely didn't hurt.
The problem is the actual game is pretty much no plot at all.
That's a typical platformer thing. They don't bother to explain anything.
I mean, I think even with Sonic would have more plot if you kind of think about it, just playing the game.
Well, we'll talk about Sonic in a bit. But Sonic has a motivation, and he has a constant nemesis. And, you know, because every time you break a monster apart, robot, you see an animal come out. Sonic is rescuing animals. He's trying to stop Robotnik. Eggman. And that's what he does. And so he's got a constant drive to keep going forward. One thing is, I don't understand Bubsy, because you collect yarn. And you collect yarn that's on Earth, or wherever the hell Bubsy lives. So they didn't do a very good job of stealing the yarn.
Maybe they were just trying to mess up his collection. Like they just took it and they just shot it out of a cannon all over the Earth, and now he has to go back and retrieve it.
I like to think that they just were looking around with their space telescopes, and they saw Bubsy just sitting there with the smuggest look on his face on this big pile of yarn, and then they dedicated their entire civilization to Bobcat up. Screw you! You smug dick! We're gonna wreck everything for you. And that was the intro to this.
The thing is, a lot of mascot platformers, a lot of it actually kind of hinges on their villain, and the Woolies just aren't really good, or they just aren't really good villains. They're not really memorable, or they don't have much personality to them. You'll be finding things like just random cars or hot dogs about as much as you'll be finding the actual Woolies themselves, so...
Yeah, the angry hot dogs are my favorite enemy, but we'll get to that.
At its core, Bubsy is basically trying to be Sonic, and a comparison between the two is pretty much inevitable. You run around large, fairly open environments at high speed, trying to get to the far right-hand side as quickly as you can. But Bubsy can jump, he can glide, and he can wear t-shirts. Given that it's hard to dispute the overall quality of Sonic, Bubsy just doesn't feel right. So regarding Bubsy, we're here to ask, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
So yeah, what could possibly go wrong with Bubsy? Well, let's start off with the game's level structure. It's built around exploration. The levels are pretty freaking gigantic, and there's a lot of hidden areas and bonuses to find extra lives and collectibles. And that's actually where the game's first stumbling block is, that the primary collectible in the game is just for points. The rings in Sonic, they provide protection for Sonic, and they also give you extra lives. They allow you access to bonus stages. Then you have bananas in Donkey Kong Country. Those are mostly for points, I think, too, but they also give you extra lives, and I think they also have a story justification for why you're collecting them.
Well, they have a story justification for Bubsy, but it's very flimsy. You get 100 bananas, you get an extra life. That's how Donkey Kong works. I think Sonic gets 100.
Yeah, 100 rings, you get an extra life.
100 rings, you get an extra life. Bubsy feels like it might have been planning to have that sort of system, because you find between 200 and 400, approximately, yarn balls on stage.
It does keep track of how many collects. It had to have been for something, couldn't it?
You get nothing. It's just they convert them to points at the end of the stage. That's it.
And points don't even give you extra lives, so it's doubly pointless.
Points don't give you lives, they don't give you continues, they're pointless points.
The only reason you'd want to not just zoom to the other end of the level as quick as you possibly can and find extra lives.
Well,
Or
you say that,
continues,
but another reason why you don't want to necessarily zoom to the end of the level is there's a pretty good chance you're going to get blindsided by an enemy.
And die. Yes.
Right.
Because for whatever reason, they decided that Bubsy should only take one hit at any given time, and we're talking a game that moves as fast and in some instances faster than the Sonic games do. And if you imagine playing a Sonic game and you couldn't pick up rings, or like there were no rings and there was like
There's no
enemies
rings.
you couldn't see all over the place.
And there's no shields either. No shield. You get nothing to protect you from damage except the invincibility boxes. Yeah, you get
T-shirts.
two.
Yeah, there's two different kinds of invincibility. One just makes you invincible. The other will actually kill enemies on contact. And
It's really kind of an odd thing to have such similar power-ups, and neither of them protect you from stage dangers. If you step on spike, fall in water, even with either of the two invulnerabilities, you still die. Pretty sure you can also die from fall damage when you're invincible. It is justifiably, people don't necessarily like the fact that Bubsy, you die a lot.
Here's how it works. Exploring is like actively bad because that just increases the chance you're going to hit something and die,
There are a lot of extra lives in the stages.
and you're going to need them because you're going to die a lot.
exactly. Although in their infinite wisdom, they decided to go with a cat sort of related theme and give you 9 lives at the start of the game.
As if they would give you anything else.
Yes.
On the downside, the only way you get continues is by picking up these red arrows that are, circling around. There's only one of them per set of stages, as far as I know. So there's one in the first 3 levels. There's one in the next 3. I didn't find them in the other levels, but I believe they're in there somewhere. They're probably just reasonably well hidden. But you get a password every 3 stages, every completed thing. So the game doesn't have to be beaten in one straight through, which I would say is, at the very least, thank goodness for that.
So compounding the instant death issues and the lack of reasoning behind exploring the levels, Bubsy has probably some of the strangest physics I've seen in a platformer. You'll often be jumping, and then at some point it seems like you hit a wall or a really strong headwind, and then you just go like tumbling backwards. And it turns out that this game has an odd momentum system to it. I think they were trying to copy Sonic or something, weren't they? Like there's some similarities there, but like they couldn't get it down just right.
To get the game running, I guess they cut some corners because, yeah, the momentum system is bizarre. It's like there's a momentum system that's running. When Bubsy's moving, when he's running along the ground, he has a certain momentum. But then when he jumps, it switches to a different momentum, like almost a canned momentum. That's just what happens when Bubsy presses jump. When you convert that momentum by pressing the glide button, suddenly Bubsy will shoot off in the direction that he's going in. Even, and this is important, even if you glide the opposite direction from the direction you're jumping in, Bubsy will carry his momentum that he's already built up to the opposite direction.
I suspect that might have been intentional, because I've noticed, like, when you're jumping with Bubsy traditionally, that's when I run into the issues of, like, the momentum system not making sense. Like, I'll jump one way and then be like, oh, wait, I need to actually be moving slightly differently, or I accidentally hit the wrong button in midair, and then I seem to hit a wall. You actually have almost full air control while he's gliding, I've noticed. Like, so if you're, like, if you're running into an issue where you're jumping forward and it seems like you've stopped either because you were anticipating more air control than you actually have, if you tap glide, it'll override it. It's kind of strange, actually.
Yeah, I would say Bubsy is entirely about the glide button. That is the button that you need to come to terms with and fully master. If you're not gliding when you hit the ground after falling a certain fixed height, Bubsy dies. He does die from accumulated fall damage. So you gotta be real careful with this.
That's a good question, actually. How many platformers in this kind of style actually have falling damage like that?
Bubsy, I think, is probably... It's the only one I know of. I believe I have played other games similar to this, or at least platformers that have had falling damage in them. But I can't name them off the top of my head.
And we're going strictly with mascot platformers here. We're
Right,
not saying...
Yeah, I can't think of any.
In anything like a cinematic platform, that's just a given, but here it's just kind of weird.
We believe there might be some Euro platformers that have falling damage, or at the very least, I know there's a couple of platformers I've played that they do have some damage given to you. You know, if you've got a life bar, they will do a little bit of damage when you fall. But Bubsy doesn't have a life bar, so he dies instantly if he has too much fall height. And I think it's fall height. I don't think it's the velocity of the fall. Because I'm pretty sure if you slow yourself down with glide, but you release it at the last second, you'll still die if you hit the ground.
I think Wolfchild does. There was another game I just remember that actually has falling damage. It's the Pirates of Darkwater game on the Genesis, although that's more of a side-scrolling action sort of game. And
It's definitely
adventure-y sort of thing.
unusual.
Yes.
Because most of these games that have fall damage, they're at least more realistic than Bubsy. I mean, already the physics in Bubsy are confusing, so it doesn't really make sense for him to have fall damage, except to justify the fact that he can glide. And why can he glide?
Well, I guess that's like asking why an echidna, a red echidna, that clearly looks nothing like an actual echidna, can glide. I think it's just because they had to give him some sort of unique mechanic to make him different than Sonic. And it's interesting to note that later Sonic games also did that with each of Sonic's new special friends, you know, original characters, whatever you prefer to call them.
I do find it amusing that they looked at Sonic and went, okay, how do we make Bubsy different to Sonic? We'll make him glide. Sonic 3, how do we make Knuckles different to Sonic? We'll make him glide.
He can also break through walls too, to Knuckles' credit. That's something that Bubsy cannot do, but
Bubsy
still.
can't break through anything, not even an egg, literally.
Yeah, an egg hits him and he just dies. He just drops dead.
They expected you to die a lot, so their credit, they actually have like a lot of unique death animations.
Yeah, there's a ridiculous number of them. And there's one in the carnival stage that cracks me up, mostly because it always blindsides you. Is like if you're riding on the roller coasters, which is always a bad idea, by the way, because you can't control them. If you actually if the roller coaster hits the end of the ride, and you know there's no track left, Bubsy dies instantly. Like he plummets off the screen in like a cartoony style death. Even if normally that wouldn't kill him, like even if it's only like 2 inches off the ground, he'll still plummet to his death.
What I like about that is that has one of those features in the game that because this game has quite a few of these just little odd touches that they've put in places. When Bubsy's riding in a vehicle, if you hold up, he throws his arms in the air like he's going up a roller coaster and screaming. If you hold down, he crouches down and like protects his face. I don't know why, but they put it in. I mean, you can collect yarn by raising your hands in the air, but it's a very unusual thing to add to a game just because it has no gameplay impact, really.
Well, the whole game's like that, actually. It's got a lot of interesting, weird little touches. Like in the first stage, you encounter like the weird trains or the cars, the pianos that are being like falling down the streets. That was one of my least favorite deaths as a child because you couldn't predict when the pianos would just be tumbling down the hill to kill you.
You could, because you actually hear the pianos before they enter the screen.
I think I was always just running too fast into the town, and then I just happened to be on top of one right as it spawned into the level.
Bubsy's jumping physics are bizarre because when he's gliding, he almost gets an invulnerability shield in front of him in terms of attacking enemies. When Bubsy jumps, he has to sort of touch an enemy with kind of the bottom part of his feet, otherwise when he hits them they'll actually kill him. When he's gliding and he impacts an enemy he can kill, you can pretty much run dead on, straight into them. He'll kill him, as long as he's gliding. But it does mean that you have to glide a lot to kill enemies.
Since I mentioned actually some of the presentation in the game, like the weird little touches throughout the stages, like the woolies, you know, they changed the sprite. There are sometimes enemies you only encounter in one area. Like there's a merry-go-round in the carnival stage. Merry-go-round? What is the actual name for those?
It's a merry-go-round, at least we call them.
Yeah.
You can call it a carousel. I
Yeah,
think.
carousel. There you go. Yeah, so like there's this carousel and it has all of these enemies in it that only appear there in the game. Like they're just the little things you ride on, and they touch Bubsy and he dies. Or then you have the killer hot dogs and like the ice cream cones, which actually don't kill Bubsy, they just kind of freeze him. But it's clear that a lot of attention was paid to this game's presentation, and probably the most noticeable thing about the game is its music. Like, as soon as you start the game up, you are just listening to this extremely catchy theme. You know, you're seeing Bubsy like jump over hills like at Mach 2, which is actually pretty accurate to the game experience. Like, I have to give them kudos for that they actually accurately captured what playing the game feels like just from watching the intro or the title screen.
It's like Left 4 Dead. It's so well done. It's a tutorial all in one. I do want to cut in quickly and just mention that the game does have a attract mode tutorial in it. If you let it sit at the title screen for about, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, it cuts off and the game goes through all of the power-ups, all of the enemies, how to play, what's going on, in a little specially designed interpretation of the first level.
Which is really nice. Like, there's just... Like, it's pretty clear they cared about this game. They cared about it enough at least to pump it up in magazines with a bunch of ads. Like, I just remember being... I don't know if I was reading magazines at the time. I'm not sure how I found out about Bubsy, but I remember renting it and just being really pumped because it was such a cool little game. Like, just reading the manual, you know, like having this cartoon character that actually talks and such. You know, just the
And he does
graphics.
talk.
Yeah, he actually does talk in between the stages. Should we actually mention how many puns this bastard makes throughout the entire game?
He's got, what is his dialogue? 2/3 puns, at least half puns. Sometimes he just says something just offhand, but he has a lot of puns. Like either the stage name is a pun or Bubsy makes a pun before he
Or
enters
both.
the stage.
It's also great though because he does that like every time you die it shows you the stage intro, the stage title card, and he always says his voice line. So it's like you'll die in the first stage from falling damage or the second stage, and he's like, "Did I ever tell you I was afraid of heights?" I was like, "Yes, you have told me that. I've died like 50 times from falling damage, so I'm well aware, Bubsy, of your fear of heights."
Oh, Bubsy. It gets so annoying when you get towards a point where you just die over and over. You like die 9 times in a row and you keep hearing the same short, snippy voice clip. You've said the music was good. I feel like the intro theme is really catchy, super great. First level theme is pretty solid. I feel the music peters out the further you get into the game. It doesn't ever reach the same degree of catchiness that the first stage and the first thing has. They're thematically appropriate music, but to me at least, it's so like, yeah, this is good, but I wouldn't listen to it outside of playing Bubsy.
Yeah, I
kind of-
agree with that. I definitely agree that the title theme and the first stage theme are probably the strongest because everything after that, except for maybe the cowboy or the desert stage, that's actually I think is just as catchy because I can still remember that.
I actually do kind of like the carnival music, I'll admit.
Yeah, that's pretty catchy too. Like even the worst songs in this game, even the ones that aren't as solid or as good as the title and the first stage theme, are actually still memorable at least and still catchy. Like you can probably catch yourself humming them every now and again. I mean, I just randomly start humming the Bubsy title theme like every now and again, and that game's what, like 20 years old?
It is 1993. It was May 93, so it's over 20 years old.
It'll soon be old enough to drink in the United States. It's already been
It's already-
drinking heavily in everywhere else, but
And the other part of the sound effects, they're all serviceable for the most part. The yarn has a surprisingly punchy sound to it.
it makes
It's
like
good.
a little doot or twinkle sound. It's like doot 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 doot. You know, like you're just picking these things up, and it's so satisfying. And like you're telling yourself in the back of your head, it's like these are pointless. Why am I collecting this? Why do I have 900 balls of yarn all of a sudden? How did this happen? Oh wait, I have to collect more. It sounds so
It's
catchy.
an accurate cat experience. It's like, yarn? Yes, yarn. I need yarn. Okay.
Is that what it's
why?
like when they play with yarn? Do they just hear that boppy sound like every time they swat at it? Because I
Yeah,
can
they-
totally understand why they would love playing with it as a result.
I gotta point out that the sound effect is not the same sound effect each time. I think there's at least 2 or 3 variants.
Yeah,
When you
it
collect
changes
the
in
string of
pitch
it-
and tone, I think.
Yeah, it sounds really nice to collect like a string of it, because like ding 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 ding. It's like, oh okay, that was nice. That was pleasant. It's really worth pointing out that Bubsy is really 1993, very very strong animation for both consoles because he's got his basic movements, but he has like a bunch of like little touches. I think it only happens in the first stage or the first and second stage. Sometimes when he's at the height of a jump, his eyes will pop out of his head and he'd be like, "Arrgh!" Like he's realizes how far he's gonna drop. I figured they stopped doing it because it was annoying, but he's got all these other things. He does the same thing as Sonic, where if he's idle, he doesn't tap his foot. I think he goes in like a runner's stance.
Yeah.
He does something.
Sometimes he'll
He's-
tap on the screen too if you wait long enough, won't he?
Yeah, maybe that's Bubsy too. I'm not sure. 'Cause
Oh,
he
yeah,
does.
I'm not sure which one it
They
is.
mix up the animations in the games, and I think he smirks and does stuff while he's gliding. He, a really bizarre little touch. There's one of the main things in the game that move Bubsy around other than walking is you've got all these log flumes just floating in the air. Just hundreds of log flumes. But when you get them, obviously there's water. When he gets out of it, if you don't move, Bubsy's actually soaked and he fluffs himself up. And it's a pretty long animation. 6-8 frames of animation dedicated to Bubsy removing water from himself. And you don't see it unless you stop moving. And why would you stop moving?
Now I kind of want to see if there's a sprite sheet so I can see what it looks like.
Oh man, that would be really impressive to see, like, just all the animation they produced for this character.
Because there's more than we've said. There's like just little bits and pieces all over the place. I don't know, like I think that's one of the things that they really pushed hard. This is important. I mean, Bubsy's not exactly... You'd think Bubsy wouldn't be memorable as a character. But I think anyone who approached the character or played the game, he sort of sits in your head. He's got the right formula there, because he's got catchy opening theme, he's well animated, and frankly, I think his character design, as sort of dumb and lame as it is, it's really memorable.
Yeah, they paid a lot of attention to the base character design because he has all the elements of a catchy character. I mean, he's got that goofy grin you can't really forget. He's got some sort of signifying identifier, namely his t-shirt. You know, like if Sonic is blue, a blue hedgehog, then Bubsy's a t-shirt wearing Bobcat. You know, he's just fun to watch, you know, just as you play the game, just to see all the weird little animations. Like, they gave him a lot of character, and you know, you look at the design outside of the game, you're like, yeah, this is really dumb. It's just a cat in a t-shirt. But then you actually play the game and see how much they actually attempted at, or how much they fleshed that sort of archetype out, and it's just impressive. Like, it's easy to see why this game was so popular when it was released.
You can see that they did cheap out, I think, a little bit with most of the other things in the game in terms of most of the enemies have only a couple of frames of animation at most. It's just a little bit. And, you know, the woolies barely have any. They jump and they honk and they peg and egg at you.
Well, they also can look frustrated if, like, they fire an attack and it misses, and then you have the stage variants of the woolly, so not as much attention was paid to them, but a lot still was. Like, there's still little touches you notice every now and again.
They get angry at you when you break their cheese wheels. That's when they get angry.
How do they summon those things anyway? They just sort of appear.
Yeah, there's no explanation for why they throw cheese at you. Does Bubsy not like cheese? What is with all these food products? Bubsy really gets a lot of food thrown at him.
I like your theory that he's actually a vegan, like a stealth vegan or something, like, and like anything that is like an animal product of some maker model just instantly kills him.
Yeah, he can't handle it. He's just like, no.
It just offends his sensibilities. That's exactly the sort of person that Bubsy is.
I do kind of wish the enemies had a bit more effort put into them, because the woolies are okay, but there are so many just generic enemies, like, as we mentioned, the hot dogs.
I'm pretty sure that's not generic at all. I like the idea of killer sentient hot dogs that just are totally after this Bobcat.
It amuses me that there's the hot dogs, but yeah, if you get further into the game, there's some really bland enemies, especially the last stage where they just went, you know what, just whatever, Bubsy's now getting attacked by bugs. Get bugs in there. That's it, he's attacked by bugs. And a frog. And this frog wants to f you up, but he can't kill you. It's this orange frog. He can't kill you.
There are like a total of 2 enemies in the game that can actually kill you, right?
Yeah, yes, the frog is the other one. As far as we can tell.
And that's something that's really strange, because if they had the technology written in, you know, they had the engine to not kill Bubsy every time he gets hit, that they may have changed around the game at some point. Because you could improve the game immensely just by making Bubsy not die in one hit. You would improve the game a lot. You could still leave instantaneous death when he touches, you know, spikes, or when he touches the water and drowns. You could still leave those things in. But just if you hit an enemy and Bubsy didn't die, it would be a better game. The frog enemy, actually, when you hit him, causes you to lose 10 yarn balls. And it spills them out as if Sonic was getting hit, but it spills them out of the frog for whatever reason. To me, it suggests that they may have, at some point in their design, been planning to use yarn balls identically to rings, and then either they changed it because they didn't want to be that close to Sonic, or someone vetoed it. It just feels like the whole game, that was what they were going to do, is they were just going to make it very, very close to Sonic. and for whatever reason it was changed.
They did get kind of close, though, at least in terms of speed, because this game is very fast on both consoles. Although there are a few differences between the two, aren't there?
Yes.
There's slightly more color variation on the SNES. I know the bosses are more colorful.
The bosses are more colorful. I think the bosses have different designs on the SNES version when you get later into the game. So I think it's always the same UFO in the Genesis, whereas in the later levels it's a slightly different UFO in the SNES for whatever reason. There's only a tiny amount of difference. I'm really impressed by the level of consistency between the ports. The only major difference is that you will probably notice when you pick up a power-up in the SNES version and the Genesis version, they're different visually. The SNES version uses a palette trick to make Bubsy black and gray when he picks up the invisibility t-shirt, whereas the Genesis just has him flicker. And the invulnerability shirt makes Bubsy cycle between yellow and white on the SNES. And again, the Genesis version just puts a shield around him that sort of blinks on and off, kind of similar to Sonic's shield. The SNES version also has a little bit of extra music. Naturally, the music itself it's different between the two versions. I prefer the SNES renditions, but your mileage will vary a little bit.
It depends for me. I think the SNES version definitely has a stronger title track and first stage theme. I noticed that the SNES music actually has more audio channels. It's like when they were converting it over to the Genesis or whatever, I think they actually used MIDIs. I remember reading the composer saying, yeah, we wrote the music as a general MIDI, and then we would write it out to whatever instruments or sound system the system was using, blare it out, the speakers, whatever. And I noticed there's way more audio channels on the SNES version, so I think they cut out a few on the Genesis when they ported it to the Genesis. But I think in most cases, the fewer audio channels actually makes some of the music sound better, because I noticed there's a lot of clashing with certain instruments in the SNES version, particularly in some of the later stage themes.
Yeah.
It depends.
It's neither way it's going to really push you to one version or the other in this case.
They're pretty similar, so no matter which system you have, you're going to be having, an unadulterated Bubsy experience. So,
like, if you absolutely have to have the music change mid-stage when you enter caves in like the first world, you're going to have to go with the SNES version. I'm not quite sure why they didn't have the music change in the Genesis version. I guess this was a specific thing that they couldn't get working on the Genesis. But the music changes mid-stage when you go inside certain areas in the SNES, which does not happen on the Genesis. I did check it. I double-checked it. I triple-checked it. It better be like that.
I'm not sure why they did that, because I noticed the log ride, the log flumes, whatever you want to call those things, the music still changes in both versions. So yeah. I guess maybe the Genesis version was first, like lead, and then they did a slightly enhanced port afterwards for the SNES.
I have no idea why. It's very odd, little different. With those log flumes, I do find the change of music frustrating, because it means that if you hit a log flume, you have to listen to the beginning of the song again. It always resets the music. So the music's are, I don't know, a minute 30 for the different ditties that they have. So if you jump between log flumes, it's sort of like it's like, oh, stop. It's clashing. So really the last thing I wanted to bring up is, we've said the levels are large, but they're really large. I'm not saying that these levels are like they're open. They're huge. They're so big they have empty space in them. That's how big these levels are.
That's my problem with it. They're just so big, and they're just big empty voids, few platforms thrown around the way I see it.
Well, it's like they broke it up into certain areas. Like you'd have like a couple hills, and then a flat area, and then a couple more hills, and then another flat area, or maybe you'd have a city area. Because the first stage is actually broken up into one of 2 or 3 themes. Like you have the cliffs, which are generally these large hills that you can navigate, vertically. You have like these flat expanses of water that you have to go over. You have city segments, which generally work by, you go up the hill and then you go down a hill, and then sometimes they combine them And this isn't even talking about the log ride things too. That's the fourth thing. So there's like a bunch of different themes and
Did you mention the caves as well there?
Oh yeah, there's the caves as well. Like I think the first world had the most attention paid in terms of differing areas and themes.
Oh yeah, the later levels get a bit. They don't get smaller really, but they get more. They get less in them. Like the carnival stage, you sort of have the roller coaster part, and you have the ground level, and that's it for that one. In the desert stages that follow, you actually have a very small linear area where you just jump across a train, which has the coolest guy in the game, Cool Giraffe.
They wear sneakers. That's how cool they are.
But then you jump down off the train to the main part of that stage. And those have underground and above grounds. Those are almost as big as the grass areas, but unfortunately, they're a lot more dangerous. This is where the game starts to get more likely to kill Bubsy. Then the next stage is the logging area, and that's got quite open. There's a lot of falling in that stage. Then the second last area is the jungle area, which, that one you actually have to climb up a tree, and then get to sort of the upper right-hand side. And then on the second bit, you get to the middle right-hand side, but the ground is gone. And then the last part, you fight the boss on the bottom right-hand side. It's kind of neat, that one. I like that one. But it's really, really frustrating because it turns into a much more traditional jumping experience because it's trees, so you're just jumping on you're jumping on leaves and you're jumping on outcropping branches. But because you're jumping up so often, guess where they hide the enemies?
Directly above you.
Yep, and sometimes they'll have them directly above you, but off-screen, flying in a circle. So you'll look and be, oh, it's clear. Jump, oh god, there was an enemy and he came around and hit me. But in the game itself, I feel like the designers, they did probably not quite the same effort to the Sonic team put in Sonic, but there's a lot of effort in putting things where you're going to end up. So even if you climb to the top of the stage, or you leap off a stage part that you can't see where it ends, there's a really good chance there's going to be platform to land on, or enemies to jump off, or something when you get to there. You're not just going to die instantly every time you jump off something. Like, there's a lot of effort put to sort of balancing the stage flow. You can actually move pretty quick once you know what you're doing. The game's just going to kill you occasionally because 20% of the time, where you're jumping is just going to put you into an enemy. And I think they knew that, which is why you get so many lives. It doesn't excuse it, but that's what they did.
Basically, the game wants you to go fast. I mean, there are a lot of the things that make you go faster, but if you go fast, you die.
But it's not the most unfair game, because it's not too stingy with the lives, especially in the earlier levels. It can certainly get frustrating. There's a few really, really frustrating points, especially the boss of the jungle level, which basically just spams everything that it can. I don't believe there's a strategy for this boss other than hope you don't die.
Yeah, they recycle a lot of the bosses throughout the game, and then it's like the final boss is the most interesting and unique, but also like the easiest. Like it takes absolutely nothing to kill it, from what I recall.